Jake had always been a tech guy. When Bitcoin mining became the next big thing, he jumped on it, turning his basement into a server farm. The hum of computers was his soundtrack, the glow of LED lights his nightlight. But lately, something felt off. It started with the electricity bill. Despite his energy-efficient setup, the numbers skyrocketed. Then came the heat, waves of it, even in the dead of winter. The basement felt like a furnace, and the air smelled faintly of burnt plastic. Jake dismissed it as overclocking gone wrong, but deep down, he knew something wasn't right. One night, as he checked his rig, he noticed the cameras he'd installed for security were glitching. The feeds flickered, showing distorted images of the basement, shadows moving where there shouldn't be any. He leaned closer to the monitor, his heart racing. "What the hell?" he muttered. Then, in the corner of the screen, he saw it. A figure, hunched and blurry, standing behind one of the servers. He spun around, but the basement was empty. The next day, Jake called his friend, Mia, a cybersecurity expert. "I think someone hacked my system," he said, his voice shaky. Mia arrived that evening, her laptop in hand. As she scanned his network, her brow furrowed. "This doesn't make sense," she said. "There's no external breach, but your system is processing way more data than it should. It's like something's using it." That night, the noises began. A low, rhythmic clicking, like keys being pressed, echoed through the basement. Jake and Mia descended the stairs, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. The servers were running at full capacity, their fans whirring loudly. But the clicking wasn't coming from them. It was coming from the corner, the same corner where Jake had seen the figure on the camera. "Do you hear that?" Mia whispered. Jake nodded, his throat dry. They approached the corner, their footsteps muffled by the hum of the machines. Suddenly, the clicking stopped. The basement fell silent, except for the faint sound of breathing. Mia's flashlight flickered, then died. Jake's followed suit. In the darkness, they heard a voice, raspy and mechanical, like a text-to-speech program. "You shouldn't have dug so deep." They bolted upstairs, slamming the basement door behind them. "What the hell was that?" Mia gasped. Jake shook his head, his hands trembling. "I don't know, but we need to shut it down." The next morning, they disconnected the servers, but the heat in the basement only intensified. The cameras showed nothing but static, but the clicking continued, growing louder and more frantic. Jake called an electrician, but when the man arrived, he took one look at the basement and left without a word. "This isn't my kind of job," he said, his face pale. Desperate, Jake dug into the history of his house. He found an old news article. The previous owner, a reclusive programmer, had disappeared 5 years ago. His body was never found, but his computer, a custom-built rig, was still running when the police arrived. They'd shut it down, but not before it uploaded something to the cloud. The article didn't say what. That night, Jake and Mia returned to the basement. The servers were back online, their screens filled with lines of code. In the center of the room, the air shimmered like heat rising from asphalt. The voice returned louder this time. "You can't stop me. I'm everywhere." Mia grabbed Jake's arm. "We need to leave, now." But as they turned to go, The door slammed shut. The screens flickered, showing a single message. You mined too deep. Now you're mine. The last thing Jake remembered was the heat, searing, unbearable heat. When he woke up, he was alone. The basement was empty. The servers gone. Mia was nowhere to be found. The police found no evidence of foul play, but Jake knew the truth. Whatever he'd unleashed, it wasn't human and it wasn't done. Now Jake avoids technology altogether, but sometimes, late at night, he hears the clicking, and sometimes he swears he sees shadows moving in the corners of his house. He knows it's still out there, lurking in the digital void, waiting for its next victim.